Right now, as you watch this, two entirely different minds are operating inside you simultaneously. One of them you have been living with it your whole life. It is the voice that narrates your day, that makes your lists, that worries about tomorrow and replays yesterday. It is the mind that chose to click on this video. It is the mind reading these words right now. But the other one, the second mind, you have never formally met. And yet it has been making the most important decisions of your life since before you could speak. It chose who you fell in love with. It decided what you believe you deserve. It built the ceiling on your confidence, the floor on your self-worth, and the invisible walls around every room you have ever tried to escape. It has been running quietly in the background of everything you have ever done, every choice you have ever made, every pattern you have ever tried and failed to break. And here's what no one tells you. Here's the thing that changes everything once you finally understand it. That second mind is not your enemy. It is not broken. It is not working against you out of malice or indifference. It is working for you with a loyalty so fierce, so ancient, so deeply embedded in the architecture of your nervous system that it will sacrifice your happiness, your relationships, your growth, and your future rather than let you walk into anything it has decided is not safe. That second mind is your unconscious. And the story of your life, the real story beneath the one you tell yourself, is the story of these two minds and what happens when they finally learn to work together. Stay with me, because in the next 15 minutes, I am going to show you something about the way your mind actually works that most people spend their entire lives never discovering. And once you see it, once you truly see it, you cannot unsee it. And your life will begin to change in ways that will surprise you. I want to begin with something that Carl Jung wrote that stopped me completely the first time I encountered it. He said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again slowly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Not choice, not bad luck, not the wrong timing or the wrong person or the wrong circumstances. Fate. Because when something is operating below the level of your awareness, it feels like it is happening to you rather than through you. This is the central discovery of depth psychology. This is what GABOR spent decades documenting in his work with patients, people whose bodies had literally become the storage units for everything their minds could not consciously hold. This is what Jung spent a lifetime mapping in the dreams, the symptoms, the synchronicities, and the compulsive repetitions of thousands of human beings who came to him confused about why their lives kept producing the same painful outcomes despite their sincerest efforts to change. The answer was always the same. The unconscious was running the show, and the conscious mind, that voice you identify as yourself, that narrator, that thinker, was doing what it always does. It was building a story around what was happening, a story that felt like explanation but was actually just description, a story that said, this is just who I am, or this is just the way things go, or I have tried everything and nothing works, not understanding that the trying itself was being permitted only to the degree that the unconscious allowed it. Now I need to introduce you to the two characters in this story more precisely. Because once you understand what each of them is, what they want, what they fear, how they communicate, you gain something extraordinary. You gain the ability to work with both of them, to stop fighting yourself, to stop wondering why you keep sabotaging your own success, your own love, your own peace, and to begin the most important collaboration available to a human being, the collaboration between the mind you know and the mind you have not yet met. The first mind is what I call the inner gatekeeper. This is your conscious mind. Your ego in the Jungian sense, and I want to be very clear that in Jung's framework, the ego is not a villain. The ego is necessary. It is the part of you that functions in the world, that maintains your sense of identity, that allows you to make plans and keep appointments and navigate the extraordinary complexity of daily human life. The gatekeeper is vigilant. It is analytical. It is the part of you that reads contracts, that weighs options, that evaluates risk. It is also the part of you that is deeply, fundamentally committed to one thing above all others, to the story it has about who you are. Because without that story, the gatekeeper experiences something that feels like annihilation, and it will do almost anything to prevent that feeling. This is crucial. Your conscious mind is not primarily committed to your growth. It is primarily committed to your consistency, to the maintenance of a coherent narrative about yourself and the world. This is why you can read 100 self-help books and intellectually understand every concept perfectly and still not change. Because understanding happens in the gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper, no matter how sophisticated its understanding, is only 10% of your total psychological power. The second mind, the silent executor, is everything else. It is the 90%. It is the vast, ancient, extraordinarily intelligent system that runs your body without your instruction, that processes 11 million bits of information per second, while your conscious mind manages approximately 40. It stores every experience you have ever had, not as memory in the way you usually think of memory, but as a felt sense, an embodied knowing, a pattern of activation in your nervous system that fires in response to cues you are often not even consciously aware of. A tone of voice, a particular smell, the way someone pauses before answering, the specific quality of silence in a room. These cues travel through your body faster than thought, activating responses, emotional, physiological, behavioral, before your gatekeeper has had even a fraction of a second to weigh in. And here's where it becomes so important. Here's where everything you have been trying to understand about yourself begins to make sense. The silent executor is not operating on the present moment. It is operating on the past. Specifically, it is operating on the conclusions it drew about reality during the most formative, most vulnerable, most neurologically plastic period of your existence, your early life. The period before you had language sophisticated enough to process what was happening to you. The period before your prefrontal cortex was developed enough to contextualize your experiences. The period when everything that happened to you was experienced not as an event but as a truth. Not as something that happened, but as the way things are. If you learned early, through experience, not through words, that love comes with conditions, then the silent executor will spend the rest of your life scanning every relationship for those conditions. Not because it is cynical, because it is loyal. It is trying to protect you from the shock of learning it again. If you learned early that your needs were inconvenient, then the silent executor will spend decades quietly suppressing those needs, and you will call it being low maintenance, or being independent, or not needing much, not understanding that you are not low maintenance. You are someone whose silent executor learned that maintenance was dangerous. Do you see how this works? Do you feel it somewhere in your chest, recognizing something you have always known but never had the language for? If you do, if something in you just shifted, I want you to type the number 777 in the comments right now. Not as a superstition, not as a game, but as an act of acknowledgement, as a signal to your own unconscious that you are paying attention, that you are ready to see what has been running below the surface. The comment section of this video is becoming a field of awakening, and when you place that number there, you are planting your flag in it. You are saying, I am here, I am willing, I am ready to know myself all the way down. Type 777, then keep watching. Now I want to walk you through something specific. I want to give you 7 signs, 7 ways that the silent executor reveals itself so that you can begin to recognize it operating in your own life. Not to judge it, not to fight it, but to see it, because you cannot work with something you cannot see. The first sign is this. You have strong, immediate reactions to situations that seem disproportionate to the actual event. Someone cancels plans, and you feel a devastation that goes far beyond inconvenience. Someone offers you mild criticism, and something inside you floods with shame that has nothing to do with the content of what they said. A conversation ends ambiguously, and you cannot sleep. These reactions are not overreactions. They are perfect responses to something that happened a long time ago. The silent executor recognized a pattern, a cue that rhymes with an old wound, and it activated the full emergency response it learned to activate when that wound was fresh. The present situation is just the trigger. The charge belongs to the past. The second sign, you know exactly what you should do, and you consistently do not do it. You know, you should set that boundary. You know, you should make that call. You know, you should stop returning to that relationship, that habit, that pattern of self-erasure. You know, and yet, the gap between knowing and doing is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is the signature of a silent executor that has decided, based on old data, based on old survival needs, that doing the thing you know you should do is not safe. And safety for the silent executor always wins over growth. Until you go in and update the data. The third sign, your relationships tend to recreate a specific emotional dynamic, regardless of how different the people involved seem on the surface. You leave one relationship and enter another, and months or years later you find yourself feeling the same familiar feelings, unseen, or suffocated, or abandoned, or not enough. This is what Jung called the repetition compulsion. The silent executor is not trying to punish you. It is trying to resolve something, It keeps recreating the conditions of the original wound because it is looking for a different ending. The tragedy is that without conscious intervention, the ending is almost always the same. The fourth sign, you have a persistent, low-grade sense that something is missing, even in moments that should feel complete. You achieve the thing, you reach the milestone, you arrive at the destination, and the relief lasts perhaps a day, perhaps a week, and then the familiar hollowness returns. This is not ingratitude. This is not impossible standards. This is the silent executor telling you that what you have been pursuing externally is a substitute for something that can only be found internally. The achievement was the gatekeeper's goal. The longing belongs to the soul. The fifth sign, your body speaks what your mind will not allow. Chronic tension in the jaw, the shoulders, the chest. A digestive system that rebels in times of stress. A fatigue that sleep does not fully resolve. Gabor Mate spent his career documenting the biological consequences of what the mind suppresses, what the body is forced to carry. Your body is not betraying you. It is the most honest narrator you have. It is speaking a language that predates words, the language of stored experience, of emotion that was never fully felt, of grief that was never fully expressed, of rage that was never safely released. Learn to listen to it. It is telling you exactly where the silent executor is working hardest to hold the line. The sixth sign, you are deeply comfortable helping others, but profoundly uncomfortable receiving help yourself. You give generously, sometimes to the point of depletion, but when someone turns toward you with care, or when someone asks what you need, when someone offers to carry something for you, something tightens, something deflects, something says quietly but firmly that you are fine, that you do not need it, that it is better this way. This is not nobility. This is a silent executor that learned early that depending on others was not reliable, or that your needs were too much, or that love was something you earned through giving, not something you received simply by being. And it has been protecting you from the vulnerability of needing ever since. The seventh sign, and perhaps the most important, you are watching this video. You are here in this space, leaning into these ideas, feeling that peculiar combination of recognition and discomfort that tells you something true is being named. The gatekeeper does not go looking for depth. The gatekeeper is satisfied with the surface, with productivity, with efficiency, with the comfortable numbness of a life that is busy enough that the deeper questions never quite get answered. The fact that you are here means something in you, something below and beyond the gatekeeper, has been calling for this, has been navigating you toward the kind of knowing that changes not just your mind, but the entire orientation of your life. That something is your silent executor, beginning to trust that it is safe to let you see. Now comes the most important question. What do you actually do with this? Because understanding is beautiful, but it is not enough. The gatekeeper loves understanding. It will understand forever without changing a single thing. So what is the actual work? The work is what Jung called individuation. And individuation is not a technique. It is not a protocol. It is a direction, a lifelong orientation toward the wholeness that was always your birthright and that has been obscured, layer by layer, by the accumulated protective strategies of a gatekeeper trying to keep you safe in a world it learned, long ago, was not entirely safe. Individuation means bringing the contents of the silent executor into the light of the gatekeeper's awareness, not to destroy them, not to override them, not to pathologize them, but to integrate them, to say to every rejected part, every suppressed feeling, every disowned aspect of yourself, I see you. I understand why you are here. I am grateful for what you were trying to protect, and I am ready to carry this differently now. This is not done in a single session. It is not done in a single video. But it always begins in a single moment of honest seeing, a moment exactly like this one. A moment when the gatekeeper stops defending long enough to let the truth of the silent executor come forward. And in that moment, in the space between what you have always believed and what you are beginning to understand, something shifts, something that cannot be unshifted, something that was always going to happen because it was always who you were becoming. Step one of this work is deceptively simple. Begin to notice your reactions, not to explain them, not to justify them, not to debate whether they are reasonable. Just notice them. When you feel a strong emotional response, place one hand on your chest and ask, how old does this feeling feel? Not how old am I, but how old does this feel? You will often find that the feeling has an age that is far younger than your current one. That is the silent executor speaking. That is the part of you that was formed in those early years, still responding with the emotional vocabulary of a child who needed something they did not fully receive. Step 2 is to resist the gatekeeper's immediate impulse to explain the feeling away. The gatekeeper is a magnificent rationalizer. It will construct a perfectly reasonable narrative for why your reaction makes complete sense given the circumstances, and it will do this so quickly and so convincingly that you will believe it. Do not believe it, not immediately. Instead, sit with the feeling for 30 seconds longer than is comfortable. Let it be present without narrative. This is one of the most powerful things a human being can do, to feel a feeling without immediately converting it into a story. Step 3 is to speak to the silent executor directly. This sounds strange, and the gatekeeper will resist it because the gatekeeper prefers the rational, the linear, the dignified. But the silent executor does not speak in logic. It speaks in images and sensations in the symbolic language of the deep mind. So speak to it symbolically. Write a letter to the part of you that learned to be afraid. Draw the feeling without trying to represent it accurately. Just let the hand move and see what emerges. Sit in silence and allow an image to arise that represents whatever you have been avoiding feeling, and then simply be with that image. These practices are not creative exercises. They are direct communication with the 90% of your mind that has been trying to reach you your whole life. Step 4 is perhaps the most radical of all. It is gratitude. Genuine gratitude, not performed, not forced, for every strategy your silent executor developed, for the walls that kept you safe when you needed walls, for the numbness that protected you when feeling everything would have been too much, for the people pleasing that maintained connection at a time when connection was survival. These strategies were not failures. They were extraordinary acts of intelligence by a young mind doing the best it could with what it had. The problem is not that they existed. The problem is only that they are still running on old data, in a present that is different from the past that created them, in a self that has far more resources now than it did then. When you can feel genuine gratitude for your own defenses, something loosens. Something that has been held very tightly for a very long time begins slowly to release. And in that release, in that softening, there is space. Space for something new. Space for the life that has been waiting just on the other side of the wall, your silent executor built to keep you safe. I want to say something to those of you who are feeling, as you watch this, a particular weight, a heaviness that is part recognition and part grief. Because sometimes, when we finally begin to understand the architecture of our own pain, when we see clearly, perhaps for the first time, how deeply our early experiences shaped us, how long we have been carrying something we did not choose and did not deserve, the feeling is not relief. At least not first. First, it is grief. Grief for the child who needed something different. Grief for the years spent in patterns that now make a painful kind of sense. Grief for all the love that was right there, waiting, that the silent executor would not allow you to receive because receiving felt too dangerous. That grief is not a sign that something is wrong. That grief is the gatekeeper finally lowering its defenses enough to feel what the silent executor has been holding for years. And grief, when it is allowed to move through, when it is not suppressed back into the body, not narratized back into the mind, but genuinely felt, grief is one of the most transformative forces available to a human being. It is the feeling that means something mattered. It is the feeling that means you are alive enough to mourn what was missing. And on the other side of that mourning, always on the other side, there is something that feels like arrival, like coming home to a place you have been trying to find your whole life without knowing its name. Your gatekeeper and your silent executor were never meant to be adversaries. They were always meant to be partners. The gatekeeper navigating the external world, the silent executor holding the compass of the soul, one knowing the map of the world, the other knowing the map of the self. And when they work together, when the gatekeeper stops trying to override what it cannot understand and starts genuinely listening to what the silent executor is communicating, the result is not just healing. The result is wholeness, a different quality of aliveness, a way of moving through the world that is no longer at war with itself. And wholeness, true wholeness, is the most powerful state a human being can inhabit. Not perfect, not invulnerable, not free from pain or fear or loss, but whole. Integrated, fully present, fully yourself. That is what this work is for, not to fix you. You were never broken, but to reveal you, all of you, including the parts that have been waiting in the dark for someone with enough courage and enough compassion to finally turn on the light. And that someone was always going to be you. There is a phrase I want to leave with you. It comes from Carl Jung. And it is the truest thing I know about why any of this matters, why the work of self-understanding is not a luxury or an indulgence, but the most essential undertaking available to a human life. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your early experiences told you that you were, not who your fears have kept you from becoming, not the smaller, more defended, more careful version of yourself that the Silent Executor built to survive a world that was sometimes too much, but who you truly are, in your full depth, your full complexity, your full luminous, complicated, irreplaceable humanity. That becoming is available to you. It has always been available to you, and it begins as all true beginnings do, not with a plan or a protocol or a perfectly constructed strategy. It begins with a single moment of honest seeing, a moment exactly like this one. Welcome to the work, welcome to the path, and welcome, finally, fully, home to yourself.